we have some stuff that's happening across the nation. This particular one is Connecticut. Why don't you kind of fill us in what's been happening, what
Okay.
you've seen happen, what's
So I
going on?
have on my homeschool freedom earrings.
Let's go.
so, so I'm ready to talk about homeschool freedom. I'm actually always ready to talk about homeschool freedom. We have had a disturbing trend this winter and spring in terms of homeschool freedom. Let me just back up and say, as during COVID, as the numbers of homeschoolers exploded, people would say to me, why do you still talk about homeschooling freedom with so many people homeschooling? Nobody's ever going to bother us. And my response was, I mean, first of all, you learn that freedom is never free. It always comes with a price tag. And that the only reason evil triumphs is when good men do nothing. And so freedom, eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And so we're seeing that play out now. I felt like the more people that homeschooled, the bigger target we have on the back because we're threatening school districts, and there's schools that have closed or merged because there's so many homeschoolers and pension funds and everything else for teachers.
Some
So,
quick numbers for that, and then you take it because I pulled them up while you're going.
okay.
2019, we had roughly 2.5 million, so that's about 3% of the school age population. The numbers are coming in through early 20 or late 2024 into 2025. It's now up past 3.7 million. So that's a million two increase. And they're actually expecting it to increase to the point where it's 10% of total student population will be homeschooled, up from 3% just 5 years ago.
And, I've seen numbers that are higher than that. But I think definitely those numbers you read are the conservative estimate of how many homeschoolers there are. And so there's strength in numbers. There's a lot of support in numbers, but it doesn't mean we'll never have any attacks on freedom. So this year, during this legislative session, we've had 4 states who have had true threats to homeschool freedom. This has not happened in a couple of decades. First, there was Virginia, and their religious exemption status was threatened. It was a real threat. It took a whole Kelly Chaplow and her whole team there, Ann Miller. It took months for them to fight this bill with HSLDA and come out the victor. The sponsor of the bill says, hang around, I'll be back next year. So we'll see what happens. Then there was Illinois, which had one of the freest laws in the country. And out of nowhere, there was a bill that was a threat to their freedom. You can go to ICHE.org for more information. That's the Illinois Christian Home Educators Association run by Kirk Smith. I just had an email from Kirk today. So they were going from no regulations to having a situation where people would have to sign up with your district to homeschool. If you miss the deadline by 30 days, you could be criminally prosecuted. I mean, this was amazing. And, and then there were several other things to follow in terms of regulations. There were like 7,000 people that showed up at the Illinois State House. So the session is about to come to an end. And Kirk said today that he is truly optimistic that it won't pass because there's not enough time left in the session for it to pass. But it shows that out of nowhere these threats to freedom come. Minnesota had a threat to freedom. You can look that up on their website. I'm going to give you URLs in our show notes because if you are in these states, you need to be involved with your state organization fighting for good homeschooling legislation to prevail. And then just on Monday, Caleb, you sent me this article from Connecticut. I was flying home from a conference in New Mexico, so I missed it. You wanna lay the groundwork?
So Connecticut did have a very unfortunate story. We don't have to go deep into it. Obviously, a full-grown man, was found who had been trying to essentially get out of his house, and I think he was over 30 years old, um, basically held against his will by his mother, and that prompted this big kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, Zan,
Outcry.
anti-homeschool out. There
Yes.
you go, outcry. So, and it seemed that the focus of attention wasn't on Child Protective Services as much, or the community speaking out and or even that kind of stuff, there has been a lot of poignant conversation specifically that this mother said she was a homeschool mom and she didn't do anything wrong. Those are her words, by the way, not mine. So that has prompted a lot of this. And I don't know if they're just kind of using it as the latchkey or they're just using it as kind of the ignition to get across an agenda that they actually want. But that has been from we've been reading, especially in Connecticut, that's been kind of the stir. Like, okay, how could this happen? Can homeschoolers do this? Are homeschoolers really just abused kids being locked up in their so fast forward to now, there's now this bill that I don't fully understand, so maybe you could kinda just educate us more. What is being presented in Connecticut, and why are so many they said there's so this says over 2,100 homeschoolers are at the legislative office building against
Okay.
this, which is a lot of people. So
Okay.
clearly this is affecting homeschool. Why don't you
So
tell us what's going on?
I talked to Donna Person today, who is I think the executive director with Teach Connecticut, TEACHCT.org, if you want to look it up. She told me that on Monday there were well over 4,000 homeschoolers there at the State House. I've seen this dozens of times where there's this red herring situation to use to try to regulate homeschoolers. From everything I've read, the attorneys I've talked to, they said that there was this child, which is awful. Weird. Let me just go on the record as saying, I don't know of one homeschooling family that's in favor of child abuse, but there are child abuse laws and truancy laws on the books to prevent this type of thing. And the child advocacy department, I'm not getting Connecticut has its own name for that. They were aware of this situation and visited them several times over the 5 years the child was in public school, and it just somehow fell through the cracks. Now he's 32 years old. He set his room on fire, evidently. They found him. He weighed 68 pounds. Well, let me just tell you, none of us thinks that's okay. It is
No,
not okay. But
nor is
let
that
me
homeschooling.
and
That's
that
not
is not
no,
homeschooling. That's
that's
right.
abuse.
Yeah, and they had a chance to fix that in his first 5 years of school. And so, nobody's in favor of that. Connecticut actually has a situation where in their constitution from 1650, parents are given the responsibility of instructing their children or giving the instruction to someone else to do. So then in 1850, the compulsory attendance law passed there. And so still they view that as if you don't want to instruct your children yourselves, as their constitution says, that you send your kids to school. And so they've been very, very free in terms of homeschooling, in terms of the requirements, because it's provided for in the Constitution. And now they called for this hearing. It was a public hearing in the sense that people could attend, but it wasn't a public hearing for two legislative committees because citizens could not respond. People were only requested to testify, and they had no people there representing homeschoolers who are advocating for freedom. So we are always advocating for parental rights. And so I just want to encourage you. If you see this coming to your state, you need to know what your law is. You need to know the issues. You need to be involved in your state homeschooling organization, and you need to go to your Capitol Day. Need to get to know your your legislator. Homeschool freedom is something that we are all responsible for. You can't leave it up to somebody else.